What we want to discuss now is the latest comedian to have a show cancelled. Now, normally, of course, I would oppose all such cancellations on free speech grounds, but to be honest, this comedian is kind of washed up. His act is kind of shambolic. It's not very funny, and I think this time they may have got it right. So let's have a look.
That's all these women who you call trans women. That's all these women want. Is someone to go up to them and say, hey, you're beautiful. You're a beautiful woman. That's all men want.
Okay, so Lewis Schaffer there. Now, Lewis, you're going to have to tell us this story. You've effectively had a gig pulled.
I've had lots of gigs pulled.
You have?
But this is the first one that was so obviously pulled.
And it was pulled because they said you were, what, homophobic and transphobic?
That little clip didn't give the... Lewis Schaffer's a brilliant stand-up comedian. I know you might not know it here, but he's one of the best stand-up... And what I was saying in this little skit that I do, which is that men are not told we're beautiful, we're rarely told we're beautiful, and we just want to be told we're beautiful, and that some men are willing to become women in order to get a little love directed their way. That's how bad it is for men.
I understand, Lewis, that the clip doesn't do it justice. You have to watch the full set. But the point is, it was that clip that got these people to cancel your gig.
Which is, I'm not going to mention who it was. I'm not going to mention the pub, and I'm not going because we were doing a benefit for. I'm not going to mention who we were doing a benefit for.
I'm glad you're full of the detail.
Yeah, no, because I don't need to. But basically, they saw this and they said, Lewis Schaffer, based on this, doesn't fit in their pub, which was my local, and it's the one that I go to quite. We've done dozens of shows.
Okay, but this is Cressida. Can I ask you about this? You're a stand-up comedian. You know the idea that a venue, a promoter, would see a clip that you've done online or a tweet that you've done and say, actually, your type of humour is offensive to us. Isn't this a bit odd? Coming from
no, it's commonplace now, isn't it? I don't think it's right. I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, I'm not trying to defend Lewis's act, obviously.
No,
arguably,
it's appalling, yeah.
But there should be space for all the appalling acts. I mean, that's one of the great things about the arts, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting that this happened on this day, Lewis, because another comedian lost a gig on the very same day, and that's Scott Capurro, who is often on GB News as well. He had a show cancelled in Dublin, and he's now being branded a child-killing Zionist. Let's have a look at what he posted just prior to the cancelled gig.
So tonight, I've been asked to not talk about, Palestine and the Middle East because the Irish are so on the side of Palestine because it's a victim culture thing. But, until they're told that Hamas is illegitimate and this war that they've created is going to be won by one side and one side only, get used to it, I don't think they know. So see you at the Laughter Lounge and see what's going to happen.
And Scott can join us down the line. Good evening, Scott.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. So you put out that clip. It was just a little joke about what you were going to be talking about at the club. And then what happened?
That image of me looks horrible. I look dead. The club owner called. I was just doing a little social media. I'm obviously bad at it. Banter. Excited about the show that night. And the Friday night show the night before in Dublin had gone very well. But I'd been told to kind of lay off the Palestinian material. I thought, well, that's like a bone to a dog. I can't resist it. And then I was just chatting on Twitter, and the club owner who'd seen that video and one other where I criticized the bus called me in the accommodation where we were staying and fired me and had already replaced me before the conversation even happened. He sounded like he wanted to crawl through the phone and throttle me. He was so angry. But he started to yell at me that I didn't understand Irish politics and how similar it was to what was going on in Palestine. I said, as a Jew, I have to tell you, that's quite offensive. And he said, you know nothing about Belfast. I said, well, I'm in Dublin. He said, they're the same. And I'm like, well, you might want to learn. Anyway, he was kind of off on a tangent and disagreed with what I was talking about in a Twitter feed, so he canned me. I've known him for years. I've been working at that club for a very long time. I was really shocked.
But
it's
Scott,
a lovely room, and I won't downplay the quality of the room.
I've seen your act many times, and sometimes you take the contrary position on stage. Sometimes I don't think the audience really knows what you think about anything because you often just like to needle them. So why would anyone, and people know what they're getting into when they go and see one of your shows, for goodness sake. So why would this promoter suddenly say that's the red line, that's the thing that we're going to have to cancel your booking for?
Because Hamas is popular in Ireland, and the Irish have a great affinity for the Palestinians. They think they understand the problem, but they don't. And they want to, I think, stick it to Americans and the British in the only way they know how, and that is to side with Palestine in this issue.
Yeah, but this
They're
is
blaming
comedy.
what's going on in the Middle
That's
East
what I
on
don't
people.
understand about this. We're not talking about a political dispute. You weren't going to give a political speech. You were going to tell jokes. That's what I don't get about this.
That's what I don't get either. I mean, I was going to do what I always do. And I said to this guy, look, I'm always contrarian. You know that I'm confrontational. This is how I am. But I'm telling you, it's such a huge issue in Ireland. It's such a thing. The abuse I've had online about this. I mean, a lot of people have joined in and said, we like your act. A lot of the audience who was there enjoyed the evening. I did 2 shows on the Saturday at a different club. I found other shows. They were great too. But there is a huge amount of the Irish population who just will not hear of it. They have decided what's going on in the Middle East, and they won't even hear jokes. They have no time for it. They're incredibly woke about the subject, and they don't want to discuss it at all.
But it's not just an Irish thing, though, Scott. As you know, our Comedy Unleashed show last year in Edinburgh with Graham Linehan was cancelled by 2 venues. He ended up having to perform on a platform outside the Scottish Parliament. We've had Jerry Sadowitz's show pulled, Roy Chubby Brown's show pulled. We had Nohan on this show. He had a show pulled. Mary Burke's had a show pulled. Andrew Lawrence, Alistair Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There are comedians who are having all their shows pulled because promoters are worried about people being offended. Well, I thought comedy was sometimes about pushing boundaries.
He was worried about what I might say. That's what scares me. I mean, I was likely to do the same set I'd done the night before, which had worked. But he's worried about what I might express, what might come out of my mouth. The thing is also, again, they know what I do, and they've brought me over many times. And he hadn't asked me my politics in any part of the conversation. And you're right. People generally don't know. I like to sort of mince about and play both sides. That's the joy of the comedy for me. And that would have been the fun of it that night, too. And again, the audience the night before that I spoke to afterwards seemed to enjoy themselves. It was in his head, his mom, but it's his club, and he can do what he wants,